It's the Full Court Press with Eric Franson and Jason Walker.
Welcome back to the to the show that we're doing right now.
Following the local teams, breaking down the biggest games with in-depth analysis and team interview. Join the show by calling into 435-752-1069 or text 435-339-0321. It's the Full Court Press.
Rose, answer. Yes! Caught! Touchdown! They did it!
Welcome on into the Full Court Press. Jason Walker here by myself again today. Had Ajay managed to get him out on the show before the Christmas break. By myself for this resumption briefly. We're going to have kind of intermittent shows happening here. We're actually going to have, we're going to have 3 shows this week. We're going to have one today, we'll have one Tuesday, and then we'll have one Friday. We're not going to do one New Year's Eve, partly because we're going to be carrying the Las Vegas Bowl, and it was going to encroach on the show, and then I was like, well, it's New Year's Eve. I mean, I'm going to be in town. I've already taken my out-of-town trip. For Christmas, went down to see some family. So we won't have one on, Wednesday, New Year's Eve, and then New Year's Day. Obviously, we're going to be off, but I'll be back Friday here behind the mic. Bringing you the latest in local sports, Utah State, obviously, basically everything Aggies, along with some talk about the Utah Jazz, Utah Mammoth, and a lot happening around the states for other college teams. And we'll actually get into that today. They have a chance to spend more time on that later this week with some guests. We're trying to line up. I've been kind of sleepwalking through my duties here with the Christmas holiday and whatnot. So with a bunch of different things, including our high school broadcasts and whatnot, but making sure we get things on track here, getting back to the Full Court Press, getting it back into the mostly full swing of things. We'll really get back going in January, especially once Eric gets back, and we'll hit our stride once again after this brief break. The text line is up and running, and a lot of texters already sending in their thoughts. If you want to send in your thoughts on any of the topics for today, just send them in to 435-339-0321. Let's go ahead and clear the deck here real quick before we get to our first topic. Want a chance to get to the things you want to talk about before we jump into some of the things that I plan on ranting about today. First, 2444 sending this in moments before the show began, saying it feels like it's been months since the last USU basketball game. I'm ready to get conference play going again tomorrow night. It's a great chance for this team to get into the new year with only one loss, which is a massive accomplishment. Still top 20 in the net as well. And indeed, the Aggies coming in at 19 in the net. A little bit of movement, but not too much. Over last week, where there were not a whole lot of games played. A lot of teams basically take that week of Christmas off, largely to get a chance to send their players home. A lot of times, it's after finals and all that. Give your players a chance to rest. For a lot of teams, conference play will begin in earnest after this break. Technically, the Mountain West began conference play just before it, but it really gets going here as the end of December and January begin to hit. So not a lot of teams played. And it's part of why I was going to do my average ranks of Mountain West teams, but it's I don't think anybody really moved all that much. Teams did move because they always move day to day. You might not play and you might rise or fall 2 spots in the net or in Ken Palm or whatnot. When you're as high as Utah State is, where they were, I think, as high as 18, they're down to 19. I forget when exactly that move down to 19 happened. But that was going to happen. I think they were up to 28 or 29 in Ken Palm. They're number 3 or they're number 30 right now. They're not number 3. 3 would be pretty impressive. They're 30th in Ken Palm right now. Excuse me. And looking at the rest of the Mountain West, we're going to get into my own power rankings in the Mountain West. in the second hour, I believe, is when I slotted that in. We're going to talk about all the madness with the transfer portal and with G League players getting signed. We're going to review some of that, hear from some of the coaches around college basketball. I'm probably going to ask Jared Calhoun about it at some point. And if I don't think he's been asked, they did media availability for him on Saturday before they went off to Fresno State, which is where they're at right now, preparing for that game tomorrow. But I wasn't able to participate because I was, out of town. I was enjoying my holiday, as I hope all of you were able to enjoy the Christmas break. Hopefully you're able to visit with family. If not, visit them in person, talk to them over the phone if you're blessed to have family that you're close to. And it's a nice time to be able to unplug. Like I still watch sports, but I watched it casually with family, not having to write a recap article afterwards. So it was a good time to just kind of set aside all the responsibilities for at least a couple of days. And hopefully you guys have the luxury of being able to do that as well. But we'll get into some of that in the next hour. But let's keep going down the text line 8968, saying that I was listening to Scotty G and Hans Olsen this afternoon, the way they made it sound, that with Kyle Whittingham leaving Utah and Jay Hill leaving BYU, the sky is falling with the domino effect. It will have football in Utah may not recover. Come on already. It didn't look like the Mountain West, or it didn't look like the Mountain West didn't set the world on fire bowl game wise. We'll get into the Mountain West performance in bowl games. Didn't really run numbers. I collected numbers, overall records of the Mountain West in the last 5 years in their bowls. Also grabbed the bowl records of other Group of 5 conferences to compare them to. We'll look at that later and see just how bad was the Mountain West, who went 2-5 in bowl games. For those who don't know the overall record, they went 2-5. How bad is that? What's the context in comparison to the G5? Didn't have time to grab all the power conferences, otherwise I would have. But I will. We'll go over that as well. A few texts coming in from 9-5, sending a couple of tweets, presumably from Spencer Cox, but I'm not seeing any previews on the text line. I'm gonna do the not safe thing and click on the link. Oh, it's more stuff on guys winning rodeos. 9-5 in his quest to get us to talk about rodeos. I can't talk about rodeo stuff because I don't know anything about rodeos. I can acknowledge it. A guy, one from Utah is doing really great at rodeos, and unfortunately, I am just not knowledgeable enough to provide much insight other than acknowledge that a good job has been done by Stetson Wright for some great stuff in rodeo. 9-5 also texting and saying, Jason, where is JD and Cam for today's show? I want Walker and Walker showing on the show. Just like someday Eric and the basketball USU player could do the Franson show. That would be nice. Get the other Eric Franson. And then did I see that someone that actually played an actual NBA game is trying to get college basketball eligibility at a power school? Yes, kind of. That's an interesting story, actually, and it involves journalistic malpractice, among other things, retractions, stuff like that. It's the lead topic for the second hour, unless I'm going to actually read this next text, and then if it... Okay. Well, we have another text going to a different topic, which I think will actually help lead us into kind of my main topic here, which is the Utah State football offseason wish list. So, but let's get to this text from 2305 saying, would you mind telling us a little bit about this recruit at quarterback out of Texas? I haven't been able to get any information on him. I'm kind of interested in knowing a little bit about him. Thank you very much for going in depth on this. And so I'm assuming you're talking about Caleb Maryland. Despite his last name, he's from Texas. And so, again, I'm assuming that's who you're referring to. I'm not aware of any other quarterback prospects for the Aggies coming out of Texas other than Caleb. But yeah, he's a player who won I think it was 6A, whatever his classification was. He won the state title. He's the guy that threw for north of 3,000 yards, ran for 700 plus yards. I'm pulling these stats off the top of my head, so they might be slightly wrong. But he's someone who's shown a decent amount of arm. He's a bit small. He's 6 foot and probably weighs in about $185. I don't know what his high school weight listing is, but looking at his highlights, I've not had a chance to actually dive into film. But when you look at those, you see a decent arm. You also see a guy that has track speed. Like, he's a guy who's competed in track events, in sprint events, and is decently fast. Like, he's not world-beating fast, but he's pretty fast, which can be incredibly dangerous for a quarterback if you manage to combine quarterbacking ability and speed. Like, you look at Lamar Jackson, and not only is Lamar Jackson actually a really good runner, but initially he at the very least just had speed, and he developed some pretty good running ability on top of that. So Caleb Maryland is a guy who could come in and play for the Aggies in year one. We've actually seen a surprising number of freshmen, even true freshmen, suit up at quarterback for Utah State over the last 10 or so years. So while I'm often inclined to not think that a true freshman quarterback will come in and earn starting jobs at quarterback for Utah State, it can still happen. And it has happened repeatedly that freshmen, even true freshmen, have played for the Aggies. But that brings me to the start topic for today's show. Again, wanted to get through those texts, and if you want to send in your thoughts, 435-339-0321. Don't be worried to derail me from the topics that I have planned here. Always one to go where the listeners want to go. But here are the things that I kind of cooked up as a wish list for Utah State. The things that I feel they need the most. Now, if you go down the roster in the offseason, basically you want a little bit of everything. You want some new offensive linemen guys. You want some new wide receivers. You want some defensive backs, linebackers. You can find at least some small hole in every single position group. But I went to the ones that I felt needed the most attention in the offseason, where if you don't address these things, you risk compromising your 2026 season if you're Bronco Mendenhall and his staff. So these are the things that I feel like need the most attention. And we're going to start with the one that probably every single one of you is thinking in your mind right now, and that's the offensive line. And we spent basically the entire season talking about the offensive line. Is it improving? Is there something they can be doing better? What's going wrong? What can they do? And by the end of the season, it was just kind of, it is what it is, and you got to make do with what you've got out there on the field. And unfortunately, what the Aggies had on the field was, to put it bluntly, one of the worst performing offensive lines in the country. And it just wasn't pretty. You look at metrics that, can kind of isolate offensive line specific things, because, you can't always look at just sacks, or although those can often be indicative. But sometimes, it's the quarterback's fault, or, yards per attempt. Well, that's a combined, offensive line, running back stat. There are multiple variables going into that. But I look at something like pressure rate. How many times is the quarterback getting pressured? And mind you, that can still be at fault on the quarterback, but I've looked at pressure rate more than just sacks, because to me, a sack can just kind of happen. It can be a coverage sack. You could be scrambled. You could get all day to throw, and then you get sacked at the end of it. And it's like, well, it's not on the offensive line if they block for 8 seconds and then there's a sack at the end of it. But pressure rate, it's like, how often are you actually allowing pressure on the quarterback? How much? Because, you could allow 4 sacks and you could still throw for 400 yards because, those were the 4 times you got pressured. You might get sacked 0 times, but get pressured on every other play. And that'll have a big impact on you. And that's kind of the way the Aggies were. They ranked 134th in pressure rate. And while at times the sack number dwindled, after it started out, they were averaging 6 sacks per game after the first 2 games of the season against UTEP and then Texas A&M, and they were still averaging 4 or 5 sacks allowed per game after the first 4 or 5 games. The sack numbers were dwindling a little bit, went down to like 2, maybe 3. Sometimes you spike up to 4. Like, they went down. Still were giving up too many sacks, but wasn't as drastically awful as it was early in the season. But the pressure rate remained one of the worst in the country. 3rd worst in the nation, 136 teams, and the Aggies ranked 134th. Pro Football Focus grades, for as much as I hesitate to, assign true meaning to them, they graded Utah State's offensive line, I think it was 111th in pass blocking and 113th in run blocking. Again, out of 136 teams in FBS. One of the worst performing offensive lines in the country. And there's a number of different ways the Utah State could go about addressing this. I think a lot of people will just say, hey, go to the portal. And Utah State's going to do that. They're going to go look for players in the portal. They're going to try and find players, power conference guys who have size, maybe starting caliber players somewhere else in the G5 that, a lot of those guys may end up transferring up to the Power 5, but like, can you find, someone with experience or size? Like, they went out and got a guy like Jimmy Liston, who I know was part of this year's offensive line who struggled, but go try and find guys who have power conference size, who've been overlooked where they're at, get them to Utah State, get them an opportunity, and suddenly you've got power conference talent. Give them a chance, let them work hard, and they can potentially become all conference linemen. That's the kind of thing you want to try and do with the offensive line, at least in parts. But in other ways, try and develop who you got. Can you get them to improve? Season by season development happens a lot for offensive linemen. There are linemen who are not very good early on. They develop, they add size, they add experience, and they develop their talent and become good offensive linemen. The Aggies have 3 interior offensive linemen who have more eligibility. Jimmy Liston was a sophomore this year. He's got a couple more years. Tavo Motuapuaka, I think, has at least 2 more years of eligibility. He's listed as a junior, but I think he had a medical red shirt last year. You got George Miley, who's got another year of eligibility. I know none of those guys performed spectacularly well, but they are guys who could develop. I mean, Wyatt Bowles is a guy who couldn't start until his 6th year of college. He couldn't get decent snaps, and then he ends up performing well enough, and turns out he was pretty darn athletic. He ends up getting looks in the NFL. And it took him 6 years to actually get a starting job in college. So I think that there is some potential for development, but at the very least, the Aggies got to, replace their bookends. Jake Eichhorn, his eligibility clock's out. So is Trey Anderson at right tackle. You're losing your left tackle and right tackle. You do have Junior Sia, who started a few games. He was like a redshirt sophomore, I think, this year, if I recall right. I think this was his 3rd or 4th year in the program. He does have more eligibility, but he also performed pretty badly. So the Aggies are at least definitely going to look for an offensive lineman in the portal. But they're not going to find 5 starting caliber offensive linemen in the portal, or I'd be very surprised if they do. One, because that costs a lot of money. I don't think Utah State has all of that money. They can find a couple of guys, but they're not going to find 5 new starting offensive linemen in the portal. I think they can probably find 2 guys in the portal. That's kind of your upper limit, is finding 2 starting caliber, solid offensive linemen, fringe to maybe actual all Mountain West. That is the upper limit on new transfers that you can realistically find and add to your offensive line. Other than that, you're going to have to bring in guys development-wise. Develop the guys you have. Coach them, work with them. You got to find some way to do it. Because I have a hard time seeing Utah State add 5 completely new starters and having it be significantly better than this year, unless they just pour a ton of money into it. Which, if they do, good for them. That'll really help, because honestly, this year's team with an average offensive line, I'm not kidding when I say this, if they had an average offensive line, they probably win the Mountain West. And that was kind of the frustrating thing of the offensive line. So that's number one. We'll get into number two in this next segment, and 9 through 15 actually touching on this a little bit. But we're going to go to break. We'll touch on the next thing, which has to do with quarterbacks. The Aggies aren't going to have Bryson Barnes. So what do they need a quarterback? What is the potential solution there? We'll jump into that next here on the Full Court Press.
The chips and drinks are endless. The burrito is huge for only $7.95. It's got to be Cafe Sabor, Cache Valley's best Mexican restaurant and gold medal winner in the Best of Northern Utah contest. Experience Locals Day every Thursday with a huge burrito, endless chips and soda, only $7.95. Finding any lunch under $10 is nearly impossible. Every Thursday, drinks, chips, and a massive burrito. You pay just $7.95. The food, the fun at Cafe Sabor in the historic train station on 6th West and Center in Logan.
Winter's here and that old car sitting in your driveway isn't getting any warmer. Turn that frozen junker into cold hard cash with DD Auto and Salvage in Logan. It's never too cold, too wet, or too late to clean up and cash out. DD Auto and Salvage makes it quick and easy. They'll even pick it up for you. Get the most money possible for your junk vehicle or scrap metal and earn a little extra holiday cash while you're at it. Call 787-1204. That's 787-1204. And let DD Auto and Salvage pay you today. DD Auto and Salvage. Cold cars turned into hot cash.
When's the last time you checked your tires? Make sure your car is ready for the snow with Master Auto Tech special, buy 3 tires, get 1 free, for up to $200 off. Utah winters are tough, but your tires should be tougher. With 22 Utah locations including Logan, Brigham City, and Ogden, we've got you covered. Hurry, this offer ends December 31st. Visit masterauto.tech today.
Your trusted, helpful expert, Master Auto Tech.
For more than a century, S. Needham Jewelers has been repairing jewelry and watches in Cache Valley. We do all our work on premises, and you may even talk directly with our expert technicians. We also have today's state-of-the-art equipment, including a laser welder that will repair jewelry with precision. We guarantee our work and offer competitive prices. So whether repairing your precious wedding ring, sizing a ring, or simply changing a watch battery, come to Utah's oldest jewelry store with today's newest technology and repair. S. Needham Jewelers, middle of the block, at the sign of the clock.
Over the past few years, strong and crazy weather patterns have battered various parts of the country. Northern Utah and southern Idaho are not immune from its share of wild weather. Be prepared for power outages with a Generac backup generator from Golden Spike Electric. They are your local source for Generac sales and service. Generac keeps you in control when bad weather strikes. Golden Spike Electric, powering your peace of mind. Online at gsegenerators.com or call 257-3016. They also service other models.
They never could play it, but they sure can talk about it. Eric Franson and Jason Walker on the Full Court Press.
Welcome back to the Full Court Press. If you want to join today's show, you can do so via the Young Power Sports of Logan text line, 435-339-0321. A few more texts rolling in, 2444. Asking, how many of USU's football portal entrants so far do you think were advised to enter the portal or are likely to transfer down outside of Braden Pagan? And so I'm up to, I think, 10 portal entries, which is almost certainly undershooting it. I've tried to keep up. You follow a bunch of these players. You try and see who's entered the portal so far, and you're also limited to whoever announces it publicly. There are guys who are likely planning on entering the portal that just haven't announced it. And, they don't have a social media presence, or I mostly focus on Twitter. Don't do much following on Instagram, where sometimes they're announcing it there and not on Twitter. So I'm up to at least 10. And of those 10, I'd say probably 8, because you basically have Braden Pagan and Noah Flores are the 2 players who saw significant snaps for the Aggies this year that are transferring. Again, at least that I've seen. If I've missed one, let me know. Because I'm only human here. But others, like Derek Jameson, barely played. Corey Thompson. I mean, he's a guy who I don't even think he ever got a number. I know he got injured, but there are guys who are injured that I believe ended up with a number. But several guys that didn't play or barely played. I've updated my transfer tracker, and here I'll just pull it up real quick and go through the guys that I have right now. So Carl Nesmith, defensive end, outside linebacker, played 28 snaps. A lot of those on special teams. EJ Fisk, 51 snaps. He's a cornerback. Most of those on special teams. Carlos Gillespie, Corey Thompson, two guys who were both injured, didn't play a single snap, both wide receivers. They're both transferring. Carter Brown played a few snaps as a kickoff specialist. Abe Yeager didn't play a single snap. Gio Confensis played 107 snaps, the vast majority of those on special teams. So he did get an interception in the bowl game. And then, as I mentioned, Derek Jameson, 39 snaps, I think almost exclusively on special teams. As far as I could tell, didn't record a single carry, at least when I was scanning the season stats. So most of the guys in the transfer portal, again, I counted 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 10 guys. And only 2 of them played more than like 150 snaps. Like Gio Confensis played 107. He's the closest to Noah Flores, who started, I think, 3 games. I wasn't sure whether to call him a starter or not, but he also didn't start in any of the last 7-8 games. He started a few in the early/middle part of the season. We played 457 snaps. About 350 of those were on defense. And then obviously you have Braden Pagan, who is a star of the offense. He's transferring out. So Flores and Pagan are probably looking laterally, or for Pagan, he's looking up. He's ranked pretty high among transfer receivers. He'll get a pretty nice payday somewhere. Flores will either land somewhere else in the G5, or maybe find a nice payday to ultimately be a backup on some power conference team. But virtually everybody else, so I guess 8 out of the 10 are going to transfer down, or if they're lucky, they'll stay somewhere in FBS. 9 through 15, kind of jumping us into our next topic. We're going to talk about quarterbacks here. Utah State. This is kind of the next on the Utah State offseason wish list. Christmas just came, but there's a wish list, or maybe New Year's resolutions. 9 through 15, asking, could we see Devin Dampier come to Utah State with all the stuff happening at Utah and his OC going to Michigan and them already having a great starting and backup quarterback with Broncos relationship? And I'd say no. I don't see Devin Dampier transferring down to Utah State, where he's at Utah. He's got a starting job. Unless Utah brings in a high level transfer, you have a starting, spot, with the Utes locked up, and Devin Dampier didn't have a good enough year to warrant maybe trying to transfer up. And as 9 through 15 pointing out, maybe he could follow to Michigan, but Michigan has its quarterback room pretty well situated. They've got some good recruits. I think they were starting a 5-star freshman. I said they forget his name. I haven't watched a whole lot of Michigan football, but I know they had a really good freshman quarterback, or at least a really promising freshman quarterback. So Dampier's not going to Michigan. I doubt it, even though Jason Beck. I suddenly had Jason X stuck in my head. The Utah's offensive coordinator likely going to Michigan. That could, normally you'd think that would facilitate a transfer there from Dampier, but with the quarterback situation in Michigan, I don't see that happening. I don't see Dampier coming to Utah State. You could see another University of Utah quarterback come to Utah State, but that's just mostly, it might be Aggie fans' wishful thinking, but it does feel like it's weirdly very possible. But Utah State is definitely in need of a quarterback. They need to figure out who's next for them. Bryson Barnes, got a lot of mileage out of him. You got great, last few games in 2024, and then all Mountain West this year. You win a couple of games that you probably wouldn't have won. There were a couple of games that you were in that you probably wouldn't have been in were it not for the performance of Bryson Barnes. But his eligibility clock has hit 0. He's not getting another year. I know Diego Pavia, I think, is maybe trying to get another year, but Bryson Barnes can't cash in on that. So you got to find another quarterback. So where do the Aggies go? And this is something you need. And I'm not going to specify like where they have to get their quarterback from. To me, the way I would phrase this is Utah State needs to go and find itself a good quarterback battle. Go find multiple players. I mean, if you can find the one guy who's definitely good enough and definitely should start, I mean, you don't say no to him. But go out and find multiple quarterbacks that you believe will battle for the starting job. Whether that be a transfer QB, and heck, it really should be all above with this stuff, but transfer quarterbacks, guys that you have in-house. There's at least one guy in-house who I think is going to compete for the starting job. And then they've got incoming freshmen. Have guys from each of those potential areas of development and have them competing against each other. When you go out and get a transfer quarterback, tell them, hey, look, we're not handing you the starting job. You've got to earn it. That's what coaches typically tell their players, but don't walk out there saying, all right, we're going to give you like $100,000 to come play and you're definitely going to get the starting job. And then if they don't get it, suddenly they're pouting. You don't want to be Matthew Sluka out there. Of course, his was more about not getting the money, but you want to find quarterbacks who can compete for the starting job and fill the shoes of Bryson Barnes. It doesn't have to be the exact kind of player. You don't necessarily have to go find a running quarterback. Those obviously help. But looking, in-house, the Aggies have a couple of options because you're not going to have Bryson Barnes and Jacob Conover is also gone. That was your first string and second string quarterback. Well, what about the third string? Well, that's where you have CJ Tiller. His entire college portfolio basically boils down to starting in the 2023 LA Bowl. And I need to go back and I need to go out and look and chart all of his plays in that bowl game to kind of see what he looks like as a quarterback actually playing volume snaps. But he was starting for Boise State in that game. For those of you who don't remember, that's where CJ Tiller came from. He redshirted at Boise State, got to play in the bowl game under that red shirt because of redshirt rules. It was one of two games he appeared in. He's actually appeared against Utah State, but didn't throw a pass in the 2023 game between the Aggies and Broncos. And then he appeared for Utah State. I believe it was against Nevada. Still didn't throw a pass. But he threw 23 passes in a start, or 21 passes, in a start in the LA Bowl. And he completed 12 of those passes for, it was 112 yards, no touchdowns, and one interception. That is the entire portfolio of CJ Tiller. But he was the third string quarterback for the Aggies this season and could very well compete for the starting job next year. I know fans always like to look to who are the recruits coming in, who are the transfers you can bring in. Those are viable places to look. But CJ Tiller is at least an option. Now, look at the transfer portal. That's, if you're putting odds on who's the Aggies' next starting quarterback, odds are it's probably going to be the transfer portal. As much as I was just talking about CJ Tiller having a big chance, the odds favor a transfer quarterback. Who could that be? You might as well be trying to guess where a football bounces when you drop it. Like, heaven knows if you can predict it, and if you do predict it correctly, you are probably just lucky. That's where you maybe hope for Devin Dampier, but more likely you end up with an Isaac Wilson if you're getting a quarterback from Utah. A guy who's a former 4-star quarterback, has a few starts under his belt, but obviously flamed out at a power conference school. So he heads down to a G5 school and could end up looking really good. Like, that's what happened to Bryson Barnes. He looked mediocre, was not that fantastic of a quarterback when he was at Utah. He comes to Utah State and he balls out. He sets records. He has fantastic games with the Aggies. Isaac Wilson could very well do the same, even if he didn't look great. But Bryson Barnes didn't look great when he was at Utah. We don't want to be looking through the Rose Bowl colored glasses and just say because he got a start in the Rose Bowl, that means he was good, because he was not good. But he became good at Utah State, and the system with Kevin McGibbon really elevated Bryson Barnes, along with obviously his hard work and development. He got better. It wasn't just these magic beans that he ate at Utah State. He worked hard, got better, and combined that with a good system. And that could happen with Isaac Wilson. Could happen with a number of guys. Doesn't just have to be Isaac Wilson. It could be any number of players. And Utah State is surely already on the trail of a couple of at least a couple of prospects that they can bring in as potential next quarterback for the Aggies. You do also have the options for the freshmen coming in. Those are guys who are going to compete, as they are talented guys. Mentioned earlier, one of the texters, 2305, asking about Caleb Maryland. He's a player that could come in. You also have Brady Goodman, who's got that prototypical size. He's got a good arm. He's also got good athleticism. Doesn't have the track speed of Caleb Maryland, but Brady Goodman is also another 3-star recruit, a guy that has talent, a guy that has high school production, the kind that you like to see on a stat sheet, and really good highlights as well. He's another player that could come in and play well. And I think given the state of the quarterback room, you will see Maryland and Goodman fighting for first-team reps. Are they going to earn them in spring ball and fall camp? I doubt either Maryland or Goodman are starting in week 1. I highly doubt that. Do we see them at some point through attrition, or maybe they rise to the depth chart? Maybe the guy that they bring in struggles. You could very well see them for one reason or another. But in one way or another, Utah State has got to find quality competition at quarterback so that they can, move on from not having Bryson Barnes. You don't want to take a step back at the quarterback position. You want to have another guy that can lead this team both on the field and off the field the way Bryson Barnes was able to do it. So that's all. We're only going to have time to go through a couple of my wish list things. There are also things like, replacing a couple of key guys in the secondary. I think for once wasn't aching over needing tons of guys in the front seven. I think the only major wish list thing in the front seven is a dominant pass rusher, which everyone wants one of those. So, join the bread line there. But those are going to be the two major things we'll talk about today. We'll get into some of these things later. Also have write-ups on at CashValleyDaily.com in the coming days about Utah State's wish list of things that they need to address this coming off season. We're going to take another break. We're going to talk about the big news in college sports in Utah this week. Kyle Whittingham leaving to Michigan. What's that situation like? I'll give you my thoughts, as well as is there a potential for there to be a knock-on effect with Utah State? Could they feel the impact of this earthquake here in the state of Utah, or perhaps the aftershocks reach Logan? That's coming up next here on the Full Court Press.
It's that first kiss, that moment in time.
It's that look in her eye when you get the first sign.
We make it personal, when it's real.
Something for everyone, we know how you feel. Jarrett's fine jewelry, make it special, make it Jarrett's.
Les Olson IT is your source for top quality technology. We carry the latest desktop and laptop PCs in stock, configured to your specific needs, and backed by our award-winning support team. And if your business demands high-performance hardware, we offer custom-built computers that can tackle any task. We also offer great computer accessories like monitors, keyboards, speakers, Fujitsu document scanners, and more. Get a quote today.
Les Olson IT.
If your furnace is older or you're building a home in the next year, Tyson from Mountain Valley Heating and Air is here about how there is money available in tax credits that you don't want to leave on the table.
Exactly. Now is the last chance you'll have to secure the top-of-the-line Lennox equipment for nearly $7,000 in rebates and tax credits. What's amazing is after the rebates and tax credits, the equipment's actually $2,000 cheaper than just a basic system. We're accepting deposits through the end of December.
So your first step is to go to mountainvalleyhvac.com or call 753-5170.
Hi, this is Ashley with LSS Insurance. Medicare can seem complicated, but it doesn't have to be. Let us help. We'll answer all your questions and get you specific information that fits your needs. Medicare is not one size fits all. We'll help you find the right coverage for you. Call 752-9493. You can ignore the TV and the junk mail. We'll get you the exact information you need. We will help you access the benefits that are important to you. Call LSS Insurance at 752-9493.
Old McDarrell has a farm, an appliance farm.
With down-home country prices and big city selection.
E-I-E-I-O. When you're looking for a friendly spot to drive a little and save a lot, hey, Old McDarrell has a farm, an appliance farm. Darrell's Appliance. Low overhead, but lots of country charm. See Darrell's Appliance in beautiful downtown Benson.
On the battlefield, there's a saying America's military men and women live by. Never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Off the battlefield, Wounded Warrior Project operates with the same goal. Wounded Warrior Project was created to help our men and women returning home with the scars of war, whether those scars are physical or mental. Wounded Warrior Project. We never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Learn more about what we do at woundedwarriorproject.org.
The Full Court Press on Sports Talk Radio, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan.
Welcome on back to the Full Court Press. 106.9 FM, 1390 AM, The Fan. Streaming online at 1069thefan.com and the 1069 The Fan mobile app. A lot happening in college sports, college football specifically in the state of Utah, not directly impacting Utah State, though it might. We'll see. Could the aftershocks of Kyle Whittingham being hired to coach at Michigan impact Utah State? Kyle Whittingham is the likely scenario seems to be Whittingham bringing with him to Michigan BYU's defensive coordinator, Jay Hill, and Utah's offensive coordinator, Jason Beck. So bringing one defensive coordinator from BYU and his offensive coordinator from Utah. I don't think either of those are finalized or officially reported, but those seem to be the pretty heavy indications, with some heavy reporting that Jay Hill is the target for Whittingham at Michigan. That'd obviously be a big loss for BYU, who's had a fantastic defense under Jay Hill. But could Utah State lose one of their coordinators to BYU or Utah? Could they lose Kevin McGivern to the University of Utah? If Utah looks at what the Aggies were able to do on offense at times, even with kind of a lackluster offensive line, they see what they were able to do with Bryson Barnes at quarterback. They say, hey, come in and do that same thing with Devin Dampier. Is that something that could happen? Kevin McGivern obviously has a lot of ties to the state of Utah, but he's not one of those guys that's been with Bronco Mendenhall forever. I don't know what his relationship is like with Morgan Scalley, but I don't think there's many other coaches on Utah State staff that are likely to get brought up with University of Utah staff. It's always possible, but so many of those guys are like Bronco Mendenhall loyalists that they're probably sticking around with Utah State. But I think Kevin McGivern seems like the most likely could potentially end up at Utah. We'll have to see how that goes. 9-3-1-5 with a few texts coming in saying the answer for us in aftershocks in football is no, but it'll be great to see the gnashing of teeth and wailing from BYU fans and Utah fans for once as they lose all sorts of coaches and players. Saying, I heard BYU has a possibility of losing the offensive coach to Utah, the defensive coach to obviously Michigan. Yeah, it seems to be that Jay Hill seems to be the because obviously the defense coordinator was Morgan Scalley. He's becoming the head coach, so it's Jay Hill likely following Bronco Mendenhall to Utah, and either Jason Beck or Aaron Roderick, I think, for BYU potentially going to Michigan. It's basically one of BYU or Utah's offensive coordinators is going to follow Whittingham to Michigan. So whether he poaches both of BYU's coordinators or one from each of BYU and Utah, that's kind of up in the air at the moment. But either way, both of those programs are going to be taking some hits with the loss, one of Whittingham, but also potentially of some really good coordinators. 2305 saying, I would like to add to the Aggies wish list of receivers. I wish Graham Livingston from Ridgeline would reconsider and come to Utah State. He would start as a freshman. And potentially, I think the Aggies are likely to going to go to the portal to find wide receivers. I mean, if he jumped into the current wide receiver room, he probably would start. But once you add a few transfer receivers, you're likely to you probably wouldn't see as much time. But he is a talented kid, and you do wish that he would come to Utah State. But yeah, wide receivers is definitely on the wish list. Like, it's not as high as needing an offensive line or a quarterback, but it's probably number 3. In all honesty, I know there's things like edge rusher and filling some other spots, but honestly, you need a quarterback, you need an offensive line, you need some pass catchers, and those are probably 1, 2, 3. As much as the defense has some things, you basically have 1, 2, 3 that are all on offense. 9-5. Oh, just clarifying. 97.5 today reported the possibility of OC being really highly likely moving to Utah after their OC goes to Michigan. The OC from BYU, A-Rod going from BYU to Utah. Yeah, it's a possibility. There's going to be a lot of things that are shaking up because of Whittingham going to Michigan. And 8968 saying it didn't look like Utah tried too hard to keep Kyle Whittingham around. And yet this was the interesting thing. And I didn't say a ton on social media, mostly because a lot of the times I venture into BYU and Utah, all I get are a bunch of weird, salty BYU and Utah fans screaming poverty school because they think I'm acting like a Utah State fan instead of someone who just has a perspective on Utah sports. But there's this weird optimism for Morgan Scally, and I apologize if I'm saying his name right. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce his name, but the guy who's been the coach in waiting for like 2 years, I think. I forget exactly how long ago it was that they named him basically an official coach in waiting. Like, they dang near had a press conference and everything. And a lot of Utah fans, again, are just really optimistic, saying Morgan Scally is an amazing coach. He's going to be amazing. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Kyle. And just don't take any of the coordinators. Like, just go off, be at Michigan. We're going to be fine, even better with Morgan Scally. And it's like, are you that optimistic about a guy who has never been a head coach of a Division I football team? This is a guy who was, a graduate assistant back in 2007, was a position coach from 2008 to 2015, and then he was a defensive coordinator for 10 years. This is a guy who has no head coaching experience. And that's not to say that you can't step in and be a good head coach after being a coordinator. This is a guy who has 10 years of being a defensive coordinator. Like, that's usually the prerequisite to being a head coach, is being an offensive and defensive coordinator. So it's not like he doesn't know how running a football team works. But like, you're that confident that he can step in for Kyle Whittingham? Like, Morgan Scally has a ton of pressure. And I'll tell you what, just off casual observation, the guy who follows the legend basically never succeeds. Like, I can't think of a single one. Like, which legendary head coach has been followed up by an even decent successor? Like, it seems pretty rare. It's surely happened at some point. But I just have my doubts. We got to hit a break. We'll come back. We'll finish up with this topic once again, just Kyle Whittingham leaving Michigan, kind of the weird situation there. We'll wrap up the first hour and head into the second hour, but that's coming up next here on the Full Court Press.
Now here's a concept. You earmark a third of your profits to go back into the community to local charities. Dex Imaging does that. My name is Nate Lamson, and I'd like to share with you what I know about the company that acquired Valley Office Systems. Dex Imaging is committed to continuing quality customer service on your copier, printer, or office solution while raising the bar to become a strong community partner. Visit deximaging.com. We think globally, but act locally.
When the snow starts flying, be sure your tires are ready. At Express Tire, they work with all vehicles and all tire sizes with safety and comfort a priority. As a Point S Tire team member, you're backed by a nationwide warranty that includes roadside protection. No appointment needed. Just stop in and they'll get your tires winter ready. 3200 North Main.
Express Tire, tires for less.
Express Auto, where tires and service come together.
Looking for comfort and convenience in Logan? Stay at the Bomb Motel for just $79 when you mention Aggie 79. Just minutes from USU. Perfect for football games, commencements, campus events, and more. Enjoy your stay without the hassle. Your sure stay Bomb Motel offers cozy beds, free continental breakfasts, and a seasonal outdoor pool. True comfort and value. $79 rooms with Aggie 79. The Bomb Motel. Call 435-752-5220. That's 752-5220 today.
Every day, Doctors Without Borders teams confront hard facts in conflict and crisis zones. When others might look away, we step in to act. Because measles still kills more than 100,000 children every year. We're there to vaccinate over 1 million worldwide, including those affected by the current outbreak in Democratic Republic of Congo. Because half of all maternal deaths occur during delivery or within 24 hours. We've assisted more than 1.4 million births around the world, including care for new mothers in Afghanistan. Because some countries only have 1 or 2 mental health professionals, we offer counseling and clinical care, providing over 400,000 mental health consultations worldwide last year, including care for migrants and refugees on the dangerous journey north from Central America. The fact is, your acts of care and compassion make our life-saving work possible. Picture the impact we can have together. DoctorsWithoutBorders.org.
The Aggies, the Jazz, the high schools, the Full Court Press on Sports Talk Radio, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan.
Napa Auto Parts has you covered with batteries, headlights, wiper blades. It's all in stock and on sale at your locally owned Napa Auto Parts. You can get air fresheners, snow scrapers, shop towels, sea foam, and more. Yeah, Chemical Guys car wash and detailing kits. They're all on sale for only $49.99. And you can pick up the last bags of Blue Heat Ice Melt at just $10. Again, it's all on sale at your locally owned Preston of Providence Napa Auto Parts locations. Wrapping up the first hour here, still talking about Kyle Whittingham. You got him heading off to Michigan. Morgan Scalley taking over the head coaching job for the Utes. Jay Hill likely following Whittingham to as the defensive coordinator from BYU, heading up to Michigan, and likely Jason Beck following from Utah to Michigan, the offensive coordinator for the Utes, and then maybe A-Rod jumping from BYU back over to Utah. I think that's where he was before, was at Utah. I suddenly can't remember all the histories of these coaches who've bounced between Utah and BYU and whatnot. 9015 saying, bad how Utah handled leaving of their 20 years amazing head coach. Yeah, like you're talking about a legendary head coach. And there can be a tricky situation, like what happens when a head coach maybe hits his twilight years and he's not much of a good coach anymore. Of course, the Utes were good this year. Like they weren't playoff good, but they were good. Kyle Whittingham wasn't having his twilight years. He still got it. But you pushed out the coach who is basically the reason that you are a power conference team. If the Utes don't have Kyle Whittingham, they're probably still clinging to that Urban Meyer BCS busting season in I think it was 2004. They probably don't have, they maybe end up having, run because they were still a good, sports school. And I know they had kind of a bit of a peak in basketball around the time they went to the Pac-12 as well. They were doing half decent in basketball as well. I know kind of right now they're a bit of a mess, but they're half decent back then. Larry Kostoyak was having some decent years. But Kyle Whittingham and his success in the Mountain West, if that doesn't happen, Utah is probably headed to the Pac-12 right now. And that's the guy they pushed out for someone who has no head coaching experience. If Morgan Scalley messes up, that's going to get, I suddenly forget the Utah AD's name, but that's going to get him fired. That's the kind of thing that gets you fired. 5338 say maybe Gary Anderson be the DC at Michigan. Has previous Big Ten experience. Yeah. Yeah, he's got previous Big Ten experience. I forget where he's at these days. I think he was an offensive or defensive analyst somewhere. He keeps bouncing between a bunch of different places. But yeah, there's a mess happening up at the University of Utah, and it's led them to abandon the best thing that ever happened to them.
I'm Dan Patrick, and this is Above the Noise. We've long known that the right leader can resurrect a franchise. Dan Campbell dragging Detroit from irrelevance to contender. Andy Reid forging Kansas City into a dynasty. But 2025 has delivered the most dramatic evidence yet. 3 first-year head coaches with their teams. Mike Vrabel in New England, Liam Cohen in Jacksonville, and Ben Johnson in Chicago. All 3 have engineered turnarounds bordering on miraculous. Vrabel inherited a Patriots team coming off back-to-back 4-13 disasters, now at 12-3 and battling for the number 1 seed in the AFC. Cohen took over the Jags, a Jags team coming off mediocrity, and has them at 11-4 atop the AFC South. Johnson in Chicago has the Bears also at 11-4 in that commanding NFC North. Caleb Williams is thriving in a revamped offense. Proof the right voice in the headset remains football's ultimate difference maker. I'm Dan Patrick, and this is Above the Noise.
Start the year